You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
Hello there, and welcome back to Force Perspectives. I am your host, Michael Cohen, and joining me, as always, the foe to my bead, Joe Hogan.
That's absolutely right, and a big turnout from all the Outer Rim territories. I know that is not the correct character, but like I can only do the same. He has like 2 lines in the movie.
Yeah.
So
you know what? I think you're all right. I think
cool.
you're okay. I think you're
all right. I hope no one's upset with me for that.
Listen. It's so perfect. It's so perfect because this is our Star Wars Day episode. Listen, if you're on Patreon, you're listening to it before Star Wars Day. But if you are one of those folks listening on podcast services, happy Star Wars Day. I hope that you're having a good time celebrating all of the Star Warsiness. Hey, little tip. Here's a little tip for your Star Wars Day. It might be too late at this point, but I'm just gonna pass this on, and then hopefully by next year everybody will have sort of like caught on to this. Don't buy anything. Don't buy anything. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's a trick, right? Like the whole thing is a trick. Like Star Wars Day used to be like, it started off, May the 4th be with you, hashtag funny thing on the internet. And then this is all ThinkGeek's fault. ThinkGeek isn't even around anymore, but it's all their fault because they did the oh no, that was an April Fool's thing, wasn't it? But I think when they actually sold the Tauntaun sleeping bag, it was like a May the 4th thing. But like it was like that. It's like it's like how they've ruined April Fools as well, right? Like April Fools is no longer jokes. Right. Then it turned into like fake trailers for movies that we all wish were actually going to happen. But now we've just got fake trailers for them. And now it's just, hey, see this stupid product that nobody wants to buy? Do you guys want to buy it? Do you guys want to buy it? That's what April Fool's is. And Star Wars Day has now just become like, oh, everything's on sale. And it's like, is it really on sale though? Is it really on sale, you guys? So yeah, that's just kind of my PSA. I feel that we need to, as Star Wars fans, take Star Wars Day back away from Disney and Lucasfilm and all of these like corporate megaliths that just want to like launch a bunch of new products and shove them down our throats. Really stuff that like we don't need, guys. We don't need.
Anyway, May 3rd to May 6th, 25% off darkinkart.com. You can buy Joe Hogan art prints. You can buy Tina Kiri prints. You can buy all prints from my friends. So gonna pass on your suggestion. And I do enjoy eating, so please, by all means, feel free to go pick up a print.
I mean, like if you can go support like a creator or an artist or something like that, then yeah, for sure, go do that.
There we go.
But that's just like that's almost the antithesis of what I'm railing against, right? Like, is this thing of like, I just like them holding back products so that they can just release them and then just
it's
one
silly.
day spike it's what it is like they're just kind of preying on the FOMO thing, you know what I mean? Like and it just becomes a thing of like, what did you guys buy on Star Wars Day? It shouldn't be about what you bought on Star Wars Day. Like, what did you do on Star Wars Day? Did you go it's also Star Wars Day is also free comic book day, so
oh cool.
Yeah, so because Free Comic Book Day is the first Saturday in May. which this year just happens to also be Star Wars Day, and it's happened a couple of times now where that's basically coincided. But yeah, like go out and check out your local comic shop and see what's going on there. I'll be at my local comic book store. Actually, I've got a table and I'll be selling art and stuff like that. So yeah, and I will have Star Wars art, but like I'm just saying, like don't fall into the online email newsletter trap of, you know, I think of like Enso Rings has just sent me like 15 emails in the last 24 hours for all of their new rings and their
that
25%
new Palpatine
off.
ring.
It's like it costs them 30 cents to produce these rings, and then they sell them for $50, and it's just like good for them. I have a whole bunch of them. I actually like really like the product. It's like, how many do I need? Because I have five different Enso rings. Not all Star Wars ones.
Okay.
2 of them are Star Wars. Yeah, and then are 3 of them Star Wars? I don't know. A couple are Star Wars, and then no, yeah, 2 of them are Star Wars, 2 of them are Mickey Mouse, and 1 of them is Flynn Rider. So,
okay.
And Crystal has like matching ones, right? Like we have the I Love You, I Know rings, and she has a Rapunzel ring that matches my Flynn. But yeah, it like
Tina has the Ahsoka lightsaber. I have the Kenobi lightsaber. Although I don't wear it yet because we're not married. But she wears it when she doesn't want to wear her engagement ring.
Yeah. That's how my wedding ring doesn't fit my fat hands anymore. So
oh no,
so I wear my Enso rings instead because they're silicone, so they're stretchy and
stretchy.
They don't care how big my hands get. But yeah, like it is just that thing of like, how many of these things do we need? You know, how many do you really need? And you know, just kind of I don't know. I just kind of like want to focus back in on like fan celebration on Star Wars Day rather than, you know, what you know, garbage are we buying that we just won't care about in 6 months, and all of that sort of thing. I'm just trying to buy less stuff in general, but
we're absolutely going to talk about celebrating Star Wars today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's just it. Like I think that's probably what's actually got me thinking about it the most is that we're going to talk about the Phantom Menace. We're going to talk about our memories around the Phantom Menace. Less about like the movie itself and more about the vibe, the world in 1999. And this is a conversation that you and I haven't had. We've talked about a lot of different things with Star Wars, but obviously we didn't know each other at the time. The internet was like a very nascent thing in 1999. Not everybody had access, and we certainly didn't have the communities that we do now. So it was very different, and I actually find myself really missing that era. And that's, you know, that's nostalgia, and obviously it's rose tinted glasses and all of that sort of thing, but yeah, I do really miss Star Wars before the internet, before I had the internet at least. Because yeah, the experience leading up to episode 1 in 1999 was unparalleled, man. Like, and I don't know, there hasn't really been, they've tried to recreate it, but it's always like whenever the corporations try and recreate it, it doesn't work. Because yeah, like there was some sort of magic with that one. But let's set the scene. Let's paint the picture. In 1999, it had been 2 years since the special editions had released in the theaters, and with the special editions came sort of this murmur, this bubbling up of like, oh, they're gonna make a new one, you guys. They're making a new Star Wars. And I'm trying to think where was the release of that first image. I think it was the special edition VHS set came with like a card or something like that. Maybe no, because DVD wasn't a thing yet, so it would have been VHS. It came with like a little card that was the Coruscant bus. Do you remember that?
Yeah. But it was concept art, right?
It was concept art, and it was concept art that existed before everything else, because Coruscant was, before it was featured in Phantom Menace, we saw it at the end in the new ending of Return of the Jedi, right? And that was like their sort of like, hey guys, look at what we've been doing, right? So it was our first time seeing Coruscant. At the time, I called it Coruscant.
Yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
Even Jake Lloyd was calling it that in the behind the scenes footage, and they like,
yeah,
it was during like an outtake, and he was missing what George was trying to get from him, and he's like, that's not the because he was like playing with his food too much at the dinner table. And then Jake Lloyd was like, that's not that, it's just that I keep saying Coruscant and everyone's gonna laugh at me, and they're like, no, I'm not gonna laugh at you, just stop playing with your food.
Yeah, so like again, this is pre-internet stuff, right?
Yeah,
like our Star Wars news is primarily coming from not even the Star Wars Insider for most people at that time. Star Wars Galaxy. Star Wars Galaxy magazine was the one that I had.
I did both,
which was the one that Topps put out. Yeah. And then like Starlog and stuff like that, right? Like,
I don't even know what that is. What is?
Yeah, Starlog. I don't think that Starlog exists anymore. Maybe it's a website, but Starlog was like the go-to. It was one of like 3 or 4 sci-fi magazines. So it was dedicated to all sorts of sci-fi, not just Star Wars, but everything. So there was like that, and like Fangoria, which is a horror magazine primarily, but every once in a while you'd get like a little bit of, somebody would throw some Star Wars stuff in there because of the genre crossover.
Yeah,
I bet you get like from magazines like that. But
we had the Sci-Fi Channel had a magazine here, so the Sci-Fi magazine did a lot of reporting on Star Wars. And actually, I don't know if you guys had this. Did you guys have Toy Fair magazine?
We did have Toy Fair. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it was obviously mostly previews of like upcoming stuff, and then like the price guides in the back. But a lot of times, especially for Star Wars, when there was big Star Wars news, there would be just an article about Star Wars stuff happening in there. So I would read a lot of that too. Toy Fair. I love Toy Fair, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like that is kind of the other part of the equation, right? Is that the toys came back in, I want to say like late 95 with Power of the Force, right?
It was 95.
Just after the THX versions were released on VHS. And so that had sort of restarted collecting for a lot of people because there really hadn't been very much. Star Wars was mostly relegated to books for the period before 1995, before that VHS re-release, and then all of a sudden, like here was this beautiful remastered version of the original trilogy, and along with it, here are a bunch of toys, which is one of the things that helped me really get into Star Wars. Micro Machines were everywhere. God, dude, Micro Machines were the best. They
were so good. Micro Machines are awesome. I actually have. I took 3 things with me when I went to Finse in Norway, where they filmed all the exterior stuff for Hoth. I brought 2 Power of the Force figures. It was a Dash Rendar and a Snowtrooper, so that I could have them fighting. And I brought Dash Rendar's Outrider because of all the Hoth stuff on in the video game.
Yeah,
I love Micro Machines. They're awesome.
Yeah, Micro Machines were so great, and I mean, like, we've talked about Shadows of the Empire so much. That was a really big thing. That was sort of a movie release before a movie release, right?
Yeah, and that had a lot of teaser stuff for Coruscant because that was in the comics and the novel, obviously.
Yeah.
But
yeah, but then like I guess it was kind of like 1998 when it really started to shift, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're not talking about the original trilogy anymore. Now we're talking about this other movie, like casting news and concept art stuff. And we got that first image of the Naboo starfighter, which is just so iconic. Those that Naboo starfighter sort of flying through that blue sky with clouds in the background and everything. And for me, I mean, I was instantly all in on all of it, right? And speculation was so wild at the time. People are like, "Oh, I can remember it wasn't Starlog; it was a different magazine. I can't remember what the magazine was called, but they sort of like posited this whole thing of like, okay, so the plot is going to be that like Ewan McGregor is Obi-Wan Kenobi and he's the main character, and there's this other guy that Liam Neeson is playing, and he might be a Jedi as well, but you know, like it's going to be all about the Clone Wars, and the clones are all clones of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, are you, no, are you kidding me? And this was in the lead up to Phantom Menace. This wasn't the
Yeah.
lead up to Attack of the Clones.
Well,
And so like there were all of these like photoshopped images in these magazines of like a bunch of Boba Fett's, blue Boba Fett's. I remember um we had no idea what a Jedi was going to look like, so like they kind of just had them in like all black outfits, or just like Obi-Wan's outfit from A New Hope, like sort of
which
thing.
wasn't too off.
I mean, it's not far off. It's not far off, but it was just like the thing that people thought that movie was going to be before that movie came out was so wildly different than what we ended up getting. And and then we finally got the trailer, and I think the trailer was like that first real like, holy crap. So what was your experience with the trailer? Like, what was the first time that you saw it?
That was a very, very slow dial up, probably 8-hour long wait for the QuickTime file to load, and the it was about 3 inches wide, maybe.
Yeah,
if that.
Yeah, 230p. Right?
Yeah. I did not see it in theaters.
Actually, probably 230i, probably not even progressive. It was probably interlaced the whole thing, because they wouldn't have really exported it in a progressive scan, individual screens, right? Yeah, so I mean, same. I didn't even have the internet, but I had a friend who had the internet.
Okay, cool.
And I went over to his house when this trailer was dropping, and yeah, we sat there and we just waited. And I can remember like we watched like that the Gungans coming out of the swamp. I mean, like 100 times, because it was the first thing that loaded.
It loads the beginning of it, and then all you can do is you can drag the slider around and scrub it, but like you still have to wait for the the rest of it to slowly over time. And if somebody called your house and knocked you offline, oh my god.
Yeah, it was too good. It was too good. But I can remember like watching that trailer from start to finish and being like, this is ridiculous. At this point, we've seen like, images of Darth Maul and and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and the pod racers and stuff like that. So it's like there wasn't really that many surprises in the trailer, I would say. But it was just like, holy crap,
they
guys,
should have saved that double-bladed lightsaber for the movie,
right?
though. But it was in the toys had it. There was literally a toy of the double-bladed lightsaber.
Yeah. I mean, there was no getting away from it, right?
No.
But the toys were kind of the next piece, right? After the trailer, the launch of the toys. Now I was in a small town in the interior of British Columbia called Penticton, and that's where I lived at the time. And we did not have a midnight release or anything of the sort. We did like the Walmart did go pretty all out, like the day that the figures released. My friend Jace and I, we showed up at like 7 a.m. at Walmart and booked it, and we thought like, oh man, we got to hurry up because like because our Walmart toy section, I mean, back in the day, toy sections in a Walmart or Target, whatever, were actually pretty decent. But it was a thing of like man, I got to get a Darth Maul and I got to get a Jar Jar Binks. Like that was my like, I have to. And I was like, we're gonna have to fight everybody off for these, and they're only gonna have so many. And I remember like he and I fast walking, almost running through this store to get to the back where the toy section was. and we sort of like came around the corner. We're like, okay, where have they put it? And it's like, oh, they've put it at the far end around the side. It's like a whole wall. It's like 16 feet. And like we turned around, like we turned the corner to it and see it. And it was just like, it was like 16 feet of mostly 3 3/4 inch action figures. And the pegs were just packed. And on the end of the like the end cap was just a whole end cap of the dancing Jar Jar Binks piggy bank. And there were lightsabers and vehicles and just like everything was there, and nobody else cared. Nobody else cared. But Jason and I, we were in heaven. Like it was, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And so yeah, like, and it was a school day, right? Like we bought our figures, and then I can't remember, like my mom drove us there first thing in the morning. I got up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So ridiculous. And she drove us there because it was the other side of town, and then we bought our stuff, and then like she drove us to school. We went to school for the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like
were you? So let me ask you: were you even able to focus on school that day?
I mean, like, was I ever able to focus on school? No. So, undiagnosed ADHD. So, yeah. How was it different from any other day ending in Y? I was thinking about Star Wars all day. I got that Darth Maul, I got that Jar Jar Binks, and I was like, these are the greatest characters that have ever been created. And I was ecstatic. And I don't think it was that day, but later on I would get the Qui-Gon lightsaber, and that was one of the weird things, is that it was like there was a Qui-Gon lightsaber and there was the Darth Maul lightsaber, right? And there was this question amongst me and my friends of like, what, like there's no Obi-Wan Kenobi lightsaber. Like, or I think maybe there was an image on the back of the package of like coming soon or something like that. And it didn't look like Obi-Wan's lightsaber, which really bugged me. That bugs me so much that his lightsaber is different in the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. And I really hated that design for the longest time as a result, because I was like, that's not what his lightsaber looks like. That's not his lightsaber. He has one. Because I love the style of Obi-Wan and Luke's lightsabers. Like that's my preferred lightsaber style. So yeah, I was like, it was like, this is really weird that like it's Qui-Gon's lightsaber only, and you can't get Obi-Wan's. Like Obi-Wan's the main character, right? And it was like, oh no. Qui-Gon is definitely the central character of the Phantom Menace. Like, and Hasbro knew, but the rest of us didn't. So it's really funny. But what was your experience? Were you at like a midnight release? Because you're in New York, so
yeah, we
could have gone to like FAO Schwartz or something where they had like the big.
No, forget that. FAO Schwartz is like, so even back then was like way overpriced everything else. So my birthday is May 5th, and I think it was May 2nd was the midnight release. So like leading up to my birthday, my whole family was like, oh, so what do you want for your birthday? And like, I wasn't a greedy kid, but I was just like, well, I really, really want to get these Star Wars toys. So normally I wouldn't say, can you please give me money? But like, that's really all I want for my birthday is when these Star Wars toys come out. I really just want to buy these Star Wars toys. So everybody gave me money. My grandparents gave me money. My aunt, my uncle gave me money. My mom and dad, even my sister gave me money, which was really sweet. Because my sister is only a few years older than me and was probably working a really crappy job at the time. So like the fact that she gave me money was a big deal. So I had about $400 in my pocket at a midnight launch of dude. I had a shopping cart full of stuff, and so I didn't actually know about the midnight release. It worked out that literally my family celebrated my birthday earlier in the day, and then my friend who lived across the street, who got me into Star Wars, period. Like, I had never seen Star Wars before. He introduced me to it when we were, I guess, I think I was about 8 at the time. But, obviously this is a couple of years later. He was like, our Toys R Us is doing a midnight release tonight. My mom is going to take my brother and I. Do you want to come with us? And I immediately turned around and got on my knees and begged my mom, please let me go. I want to get that stuff. And she was like, I don't like the idea of you and like your child friends being out having all of this money on you, like waiting in line at a toy store until midnight. And I was just like, I will do anything. Please let me go. And she's like, listen, no matter what time you get home, you're going to school tomorrow. It was a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, oh my God. So we went. And by the time we got there, we went, I think, we got there by 9, and there was one kid ahead of us. So it was one kid and then us. And dude, like those doors, I mean, there was a pretty long line by the time the doors opened, but when those doors opened, huge. There was so right when you walk in, as soon as you walked in, just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of figures. I grabbed a shopping cart. I got every single figure that came out. I got the Naboo Starfighter, and I got the some of the Star Wars new Episode 1 Legos that had just come out. And I spent most of that $400. And then, you know, went home, went to bed. Just got like zero focus the next day at school. And then went home and like took like inventory of everything to be like, I have a little bit of money left over. Maybe I should save it. No, I'm going to get other stuff that I want to get. And ended up buying the Darth Maul lightsaber. So yeah, that was my first experience, and it was awesome. It was so awesome the way it worked out.
$400 today to go do a Star Wars shopping spree would be decent.
Yeah.
Would be nice. But $400 when the action figures were, what were they, like $5?
Yeah,
at the
they
time?
were like $5 or $6 each. Yeah,
unbelievable.
Awesome.
I cannot fathom. That all through that summer, I would just like every time I got some money, I would go to the mall or Walmart or whatever and grab another thing. I mean, so much of my collection, so much of the stuff that's packed away is from that couple of years, you know, sort of 97, 98, 99. Cause that was, to me, like that was the first peak of collecting. Revenge of the Sith was the second. Man, the figures around Revenge of the Sith and the first couple of years of Clone Wars, like that period from 2005 until about 2010. Oh boy, collecting was nice. But 1999 was like, it was a doozy, man. It was a doozy. Because then, like later in that year, it wasn't just Phantom Menace, right? We got more Power of the Force stuff. I know, like the Rancor came out that year, the Power of the Force Rancor, which I still have to this day. He's one of the prize pieces of my collection because I love him so much. And I don't think they've done a Rancor as good since, because it's based on the sculpt of like the old school 83 one from Return of the Jedi from that release, right? But then instead of it being hard plastic, he's like rubber. And just the texture and the paint job on him is so pristine.
And he's like a little bit more articulated too, right?
A little bit. He's kind of, I mean, what's he got? 1, 2. I'm looking at him right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the wrists go, the shoulders go, and the legs go. But that's pretty much it. Like the head, like the whole body is just one big chunk. And the elbows don't bend at all. But yeah, he's a beautiful figure. So I mean, like that release was basically right before the movie, right? Because the movie ends up coming out like 2 weeks later, 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, because I think it was May 2nd, and then the 16th, 17th, or something.
Was it the 19th? I think it was the 19th, but I know I did get a Qui-Gon lightsaber right before Phantom Menace release, because I did have it with me.
Cool.
For the midnight release. But that was actually not my first midnight opening for a film, but it was my first lineup. It was my first like midnight screening lineup. My first midnight screening was The Lost World, Jurassic Park.
Oh, cool.
My dad, I found out that they were doing the midnight screening on a Thursday with school the next day on a Friday, and I said to my dad, I gotta go because Jurassic Park's like one of my absolute favorite things.
I didn't realize that was before Phantom Menace.
Yeah, 97.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And he was like, let me check with your mom. And my mom was like, same deal that you got with the midnight opening for the toys. My mom was like, you can go, you're going to school the next day. And we went and got like the souvenir. Back in the day they used to do like the guide, right? Like for and if you were at like opening or whatever, you could get like a book, basically, right? Oversized book. And I got that. I remember going to school the next day after seeing Lost World and being like, hey, I saw the new Jurassic Park last night. And everybody was like BS, man. No way. You weren't at the movie, because I was in 6th grade, right? They're like, no, you weren't at the movies last night at midnight. Come on, like tell us another one, Mike. And I was no, real.
Did you talk about it to prove it so that like when they went to go see it?
No, I was just like, you guys don't have to believe me. I saw the movie and it was awesome. And I mean, I still to this day love The Lost World. I think it's a great film, but I know that everybody else is grumpy about it. More on that trend later. But yeah, I had the book, and so like I was like, fine, on Monday I'll bring the book, and like I brought the book with me, and they're like, you could have just gone and gotten that over the weekend, and it was like, they didn't have them over the weekend. They only had them on opening night because they only had like 20 of them.
At that point, I would have just started spoiling stuff to be like, all right, here's what happens in the movie. Go watch the movie. Tell me I'm wrong.
You know, spoiler culture wasn't really a thing because the internet wasn't a thing. So it was like if I had just said what happened in the movie, people would have just been like, okay, right. But yeah, but Phantom Menace was the first time that I lined up for a midnight opening, and it was the first time that I was able to go by myself to a midnight opening. So I wasn't, I was not alone, and obviously like it was, I mean, we were in the newspaper, not me specifically, but like the lineup was in the newspaper. Like it was like, I mean, it was news everywhere. It wasn't just our small town. It was everywhere that had a theater and a newspaper. It was like Star Wars fans have lined up for this stuff. But yeah, it was a pretty incredible experience because to that point, Star Wars, in my experience, was like this thing that me and my friends were into, and my dad was like, "Yeah, Star Wars is pretty great." I was there in 1977 in California. I like they went. My mom and dad went opening weekend to I think it's Century City is the theater that they went to. So like not like, you know, the Chinese, but Century City was. My dad would always tell the story. He was like, yeah, like everybody knows the Grauman's, right? Because it's famous. It's on Hollywood Boulevard, blah blah blah. But the Century City Theater was nicer. Like he always says it that way. Where he's like, no, we wanted to see it on the biggest screen. But they were there like opening night. So he told me about that, and so like it was like my dad got it. Like my dad understood. He was like, yeah, go. And me and a couple of other friends, and we were in that lineup, and there were all these other adults. There were like old people, and when I look back at it now, it's like they were like college students, right? Like they were like 18, 19, 20, but I was like 14, right? So I'm like, oh my God. Like, and me and my friend Jeremy were in line, and there was this guy in front of us that at the time we thought this dude was the coolest person on the planet. Cause he had like, he was I mean, like he was legitimately, I think a decently cool person, but like the kind of cool person that's at a midnight opening of a Star Wars movie. He was just a fairly average looking guy, but he had these goggles. His whole outfit was kind of like, I don't know, kind of like alt sort of a
Okay.
little bit, but he had goggles and was like had them like around his neck, sort of thing, and we were just like, this dude's so rad, like this dude is so cool. And he was talking to us about Star Wars, and we're these stupid kids. um but we like, man, we ordered pizza, and had it delivered to the line for me and him, like it was, we had our Mountain Dew, and like it was just, it was the best. Like we left school early that day. We didn't, like, I had to go to school in the morning
Mm.
because this again would have been a Thursday, right? So I had to go to school in the morning, but my mom was like, you can leave after lunch. So like
Whoa.
at lunch or whatever. So we left at lunch, and by the time that we got there was already a line. It was already pretty crazy
Mm.
because in Penticton there's one theater and it
Mm.
had 4 screens, and yeah, so it was like, it was pretty crazy. We got there were probably about 30 or 40 people ahead of us, and you're talking about
Jeez.
a theater that's going to fit maximum 150 people,
Wow.
if I had to guess. If it was even that, like this was like a little small town theater.
Mm.
And I saw all the prequels in the same theater. I And yeah, so we got there and there was already a bunch of people there. We got in line, and we didn't, like, nobody had tickets yet. Like they weren't, like, you bought your ticket as you went into the theater. Like there was no
Oh
like
my
buying
God.
tickets
There
in
was no
advance.
pre-sale tickets? Oh
There was no
man.
pre-sale on these tickets. The tickets were a receipt. Like your movie ticket, your stub from this theater was like the receipt would print out with the name of the movie and the price that you
Oh
paid for
man.
it, and that was it. Like that was the whole thing. um yeah, just like thermal paper, like regular old receipt. Like this was an
Wow.
old school
Mm.
theater. I honestly, I missed the hell out of it. Like
Mm.
I love going to the big massive, Cineplex, VIP IMAX experiences and whatever, but I really missed little hole in the wall theaters. When we went over to the Sunshine Coast last September, and we went and hung out in like this little town, and they had a one screen old school theater, and like they had like updated their projector and stuff, so it was actually like really great quality picture and sound. But the theater itself was like old school,
Mm.
old school, and I loved it. I was like, this is the best. They're showing 2 movies, and it's like there's like a 7 o'clock movie and a 9 o'clock movie, and it was like, um what were they showing? We saw Elemental, and I think the other movie that they were showing, or maybe it was coming, was Oppenheimer. Like, and this was September, right? So those movies had been out for a while.
Mm.
like it was like, it's like second run, right? Yeah, I love little theaters like that. Like that's sort of a dream of mine. Is like, man, I wish I could like buy a theater, like just own like a little like 3 or 4 screen theater, and just like play old movies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a crazy thing to dream about, but it is
I
definitely a
mean,
thing where I'm like,
it's a
that would be
valid
so
one.
cool. It would be so cool. But yeah, I yeah, that lineup was the best. It was that night. It was just like electric, man. Like there, like the atmosphere was so crazy. Everybody was so excited, and like there's not really much to say about the experience of watching the movie. We watched the movie and I was like blown away by it. I thought that
Mm.
it was great. I walked out of it like that was the coolest thing ever. Um and everybody was super excited coming out of the theater. It wasn't until like weeks later that I found out that everybody was like, I don't know, that new Star Wars movie's pretty crappy. It's like, obviously it was the comic book store where I discovered
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Where the owner of the comic shop was like, yeah, that movie was terrible. That Jar Jar Binks character is the worst. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I completely disagree. Um, what was your opening night experience?
So my first midnight movie, I didn't even know midnight movies were a thing until literally Attack of the Clones.
Mm,
So for me, it was wait one more day, go to school, and then you can go see the movie.
yeah.
So there wasn't any danger of it being sold out like as soon as you got out of school. So my dad was like, all right, I'll take you and, those same two friends. He's like, all right, I'll grab all three of you guys. We'll go see the movie straight after school, and then we'll get something to eat or whatever. And like in grammar school, so I guess I was in about 7th grade. So I was with the same kids from 1st through 8th grade. I mean, some people left, some people came, but like it was, for the most part, it was the same core group of people. So since the 4th grade, these people knew that like, oh, this is the Star Wars guy in class. Like he's, and I was very friendly with everyone. I didn't really have any, like there were people that I was like friends with. And then there were people like the rest of everybody else. I had no problem getting along with everybody. So when it came time, like that last bell rang, everybody knew that I was going to see Star Wars. So I'm quickly like throwing all my stuff together and getting my backpack ready, and I can't wait to get the hell out of class. And I walk out, and somebody yells, I'll never forget this, "Joe's going to see Star Wars, everybody!" And everybody went, "Yeah!" And people started following me out, and it was like a long hallway from the classroom to the exit. People started following me out and singing out loud the throne room theme from the end of A New Hope. I will never forget this as long as I live. And it was just me strutting down this hallway while this big group of guys are singing, and it's just awesome. They're all singing, and I'm just marching down, like straight down the middle of this hallway. It was like, it's one of my favorite Star Wars memories of my entire life. I'll never forget that moment. And then we went. No one was there. It was like me, my dad, my two friends, and maybe 2 other people in the entire theater. And it was awesome, and I loved it. I loved every second of it. It was awesome.
That's awesome, because from me, my experience in 8th grade when the Phantom Menace came out, it's like, everybody definitely knew that I was the Star Wars guy, but it was like, hey, everybody, Mike's going to see Star Wars. So
that was high school for me, but grammar school was still pretty magical.
I wish that it was as cool as your experience was, but it was definitely much more of the Mike still plays with toys.
And they knew, because I brought those figures in the next day when I bought them. Everybody wanted to see them, and I kept a very close eye on them. I brought in Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and I think Anakin, because my homeroom teacher was also a really big Star Wars fan. So I brought them literally to show her, because I was like, I don't think anybody else is going to care, but like, I'm going to show her. But like, everybody actually cared and wanted to see them. So it was cool.
That's awesome. So after the movie came out, how long was it before you realized that everybody now all of a sudden hates Star Wars?
I mean, it was probably the same type of situation where I was in a comic book store. I remember some older kids like making fun of Jar Jar and saying Star Wars sucks now and that. But like, to me, it was just like, all right, well, I thought Star Wars was stupid before I saw it. Maybe they just don't get it or whatever. But it was once I started seeing like Toy Fair magazine making fun of it, I was like, oh no, what's going on here?
Yeah, it was so weird. It was so weird because I loved the movie so much, and in particular, the things that other people did not like Jar Jar. Like I thought Jar Jar was great. I mean, like I definitely understood the criticism of like Jake Lloyd, right, and his the Yippee in particular. Where I was like, I get it. That is one of those things. The Yippee is an awful lot like the no in Revenge of the Sith, and then George putting that in Return of the Jedi, where it's like, I don't think George understands how human beings talk sometimes. But like it's just kind of, that's just kind of Star Wars, you know. Like I just kind of take it with a grain of salt. I don't attribute that. the vitriol that ends up coming out, right? Like the people who like just absolutely rip into Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best. To me, it's like,
Well, that's just gross. Like,
well, I mean,
there's
like first,
no
like
excuse.
Jake Lloyd's a kid, and
Yeah.
it's like he is not responsible. He showed up, did the job, and George didn't do a particularly good job of directing him because he's in other movies and he's fine,
Yeah.
right? But like he's not a bad actor in Jingle All the Way, for example, right? I like he's a kid actor, and you know you're gonna get uneven performances from most kid actors. Every once in a while you find one that will blow you away. It would have been amazing if Haley Joel Osment had been cast, but like that's not the case, right? But yeah, like I can remember people just like ripping into it and being like, I don't understand. The biggest criticism that I remember hearing that I couldn't square it was the ship designs. Everybody was like they don't even look like Star Wars ships, and it's like, well, what is
It's
your
before
definition?
the Star Wars ships.
What is your definition? This is a different time period, and it's a different planet that we've never been to, and the Imperial ships are actually like pristine. They're just not shiny, right? Like when you look at the models, and like this was one of those things. Is that this is my first encounter of. And I didn't understand it at the time, but I know it now, of like normal people engaging with Star Wars, right? Because normal people engaging with Star Wars are looking at things on like a very surface way, right? And they're not watching all of the behind the scenes stuff, and they haven't seen really highly detailed photographs of model kits that were used in the films, in a Star Wars Insider or Star Wars Galaxy magazine, right? So they don't know, like they see the X-Wings, which we see up close because the characters get in them, right? We see the Falcon up close and the Land Speeder, and these things are all dirty, right? And then the Star Destroyers, we never really get that close into it, but it's all detailed, so we see it like sort of as grungy steampunk-ish as well, right? And the TIE fighters, you never really get a good look in the original trilogy at a TIE fighter. Never. Like they are always screaming past on screen, right? But they have tons of texture on them because of the wings, right? And that's like sort of the primary thing. And there's a little bit of the scoring and detailing and stuff like that on them, like the weathering. But when you really look at them, like those, like they presented those in the films as like pretty immaculate. Like they were pretty tidy, all those TIE fighters, compared to then like an X-Wing and a Y-Wing and the snow speeders and whatever that looked rough, right? So like for me, it was like, well, there are different, and then on top of that, we had expanded universe stuff at the time, and it was like, well, you guys only know the movies, you don't know what you're talking about, right? And it's like, but these Naboo starfighters, like people just like in my circle, like that was the thing that so many people glommed onto after
so stupid.
After they
So
went off
stupid.
on Jar Jar. The next thing was like these yellow spaceships are just like they don't look like Star Wars. They're too clean, they're too nice, they're too shiny and chrome and whatever. And I was just like,
I actually never heard that criticism.
Yeah, you never
if
did.
I did, I forgot about it, but I've never heard that.
It was so weird to me because I loved the N1. I maintain that I love the N1. But there was a period of time where I feel like I probably shied away from it a little bit and acted like I didn't like it as much because everybody else griped about it so much, right? But like, yeah, when I unlocked that thing in Rogue Squadron on the GameCube, it was like, come on, like let's go. It's beautiful. And the thing that I loved about that is when you do unlock it in Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, it's not pristine. It's really banged up because it's old, actually right? Like it's part of a story, right? Like it's an optional story path to unlock the N1. And when you get it, it's like it is a Republic era N1. Like it's an old beater that you kind of take because you need another ship, right? But then when you see it in the hangar, it's like it's not in great condition, and I loved that because it was like, yeah, like these were like the whole point of them. It's like so many of the things in the prequels, like this was the beginning of it for me, of beginning to realize that like other people are just not watching these movies the way that you are. The things that they would gripe about were literally the things that George was trying to like highlight and make a point of.
Yeah.
The reason the N1s are shiny and chrome is because they are royal starfighters.
Yeah. And new. Brand new. They're
So
not hand-me-down ships.
Like they actually suck. Right? Like in terms of like if you were to pit them against an X-wing or pit them against, you know, an A-wing or a B-wing or something like that, it's like, yeah, the N1 is an inferior ship. They weren't built for war. They were built for security, and they were mostly built for parades, right? Like they were mostly built for air shows. Like that's the time period that we're in, is that, and people just like didn't pay enough attention to the actual story in the prequels to like clock there's visual storytelling going on here in the same way that there was visual storytelling going on in the first one. But then exactly what I'm saying is like the fact that they miss the idea that the Empire's stuff is all clean and uniform, and then the rebels are like scrappy and everything looks like it's been through the ringer, right? Like so many people on face value just attribute the aesthetic of the Millennium Falcon to all of the ships. And it's like, yeah, you're not really paying attention. If you like when those movies came out in high def, like on Blu-ray, and you saw that Star Destroyer for the first time, like on a really big screen in crystal clarity, it's like it's white, right? Like I always kind of like clocked them as gray as a kid, and then you see it for the first time in high def, and especially now like 4K on like a 4K HDR display, and it's like, oh my god, like I because there's also like a bit of a disconnect when you see the Star Destroyers in Rogue One, where they're really really pristine because they're digital models.
Yeah.
And there's almost like you have to kind of readjust a little bit, but it's like that's the original vision though, right? Like that's what they should look like. And yeah, like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, we watch these movies different than other people. Like they aren't watching for the same things that we're watching for. They're watching this movie the same way that they're watching Jurassic Park. And there's another prime example of a franchise that like most people are not watching those movies correctly either, which is why The Lost World gets the flack that it gets, because The Lost World is much more about the themes than it is about the plot. The plot is very straightforward. I mean, the plot's very straightforward in Jurassic Park as well, but eventually you get to the point where they go like, here's a Jurassic Park movie that is built the way you guys think Jurassic Park movies are built in JP3. And then everybody's like, oh, this is terrible. This isn't what we want. And it's like, yeah, because those other two movies weren't this. Right, like those the other two movies were like thematic and very like almost, the first Jurassic Park is slow as hell. It's an esoteric movie. Like it's like that by today's standard. You compare that to a Fast and the Furious, and Jurassic Park's an art house movie, right? Like the pace at which that thing goes before we ever see a dinosaur, and then we see one, and then it's going to be another 40 minutes before we see another one, and it's laying down in the grass like. But yeah, people, I just, and this is film snob stuff, I guess, but like I just really feel like in terms of media literacy, people put film and television on a lower rung than they put books, than they put classical literature like Shakespeare or Chaucer or something like that. And it's like, no, actually, I think that film is probably the highest art form that we've created as human beings. It's the thing that we are able to convey the absolute most information with the most emotion and thematic quality and all that stuff, and absolutely at the highest fidelity, right? And yet we sort of have this attitude about film that it's populist, I guess. I don't know. I which it is, but it also doesn't have to be. And but it also, like, it can be meaningful without being an art house movie. You know what I mean? And like, it's like that we want to, like, draw these lines of division. Because I would go to film school, and when I went to film school, it was like, at that point, Star Wars was like a non commodity to these people that I was in school with. And I was a fresh-faced 18-year-old punk wanting to make Star Wars movies, and everybody else there wanted to make Sex, Lies, and Videotape, right? Like, they all thought that they were going to be, I don't know, Soderbergh or they would consider Kevin Smith to be too, like, mainstream, right? They which at the time, because we're talking about 2003, 2004, right? When I was in film school. So at the time, like, Kevin Smith was like nothing. He was like a nobody. He was that one indie guy that made a couple of weird little indie movies, right? But they all thought that they were gonna make, the next, I don't know, whatever, pick a art house, hoity-toity movie, that is just everybody else's projects were just about, this is a joke about film school, especially back then. I don't know if it's still the same way today, but back then it was like, it's not a film school project if it doesn't involve a gun, cocaine, and some sort of deviant sexual behavior, right? Like, it has to have one of those three things, or it's not a film school project. And my stuff had none of that.
I'd watch that Star Wars movie.
Well, I mean, like, honestly, it's probably one of the reasons why I have an aversion to Andor, because Andor is very much film school Star Wars, right? Where it's like, oh, get rid of all the aliens and robots and stuff. We're here to talk about real stuff. And it's like, but that's not what I'm in Star Wars for. Real stuff happens around me all the time. I'd rather with the pretensies and the shiny spaceships. Thank you. Give me the pew pew lasers. But yeah, I don't know. But Phantom Menace was absolutely my awakening to the fact that, like, I was not like everybody else, for better or worse, right? And it is definitely both of those things. It is better and it is worse. I feel like I have a very strong appreciation for film and the amount of work that goes into it and the artistry of it, and I wouldn't change that for the world. But it really makes me no fun at parties, because people will start talking about. People will find out that I'm a Star Wars fan, and they'll start talking to me about Star Wars, and I will shut that down. At this point now, like, I will be 39 at the end of this month, and at this point in my life, I just don't have time for it. I don't have the energy for it. Like, listen, what you think is Star Wars is a very different thing from what I think is Star Wars, and we don't need to get into it. Like, that's sort of where I'm at with the normies, with the mundanes,
the civvies.
Yeah, like, don't talk to me, because, like, you're talking about 6 movies. Like, you're not even talking about the new movies. You're not even talking about Rogue One or Solo. Like, those don't even register when you talk about Star Wars. I'm talking about a comic book that I read when I was 12, right? Like, I'm talking about a piece of lore that came from the back of a cereal box or a Decipher customizable card game. Like, get out of here. Like, my first encounter with Davin Felth was a card from the Decipher card game, and I was like, this is interesting to me. He's a stormtrooper with a name. That's where I'm at. And that's not to be gatekeepy or I don't know, like arrogant or anything about my Star Warsiness. Like, I'm not. It's just like you don't want to talk to me about Star Wars the way that I want to talk about Star Wars, right? It's like when people find out that I have podcasts and they're like, oh, maybe I'll give that a listen. I'm like, please don't. Please don't. It's not for you. It's not for you. And if you're here, you're one of those people and you're here, I appreciate, the support and you hanging out. And I hope that you get something out of listening to me on podcasts, talk about this stuff. But like, yeah, man, like we are just not engaging with this content in the same way, it's just not the way it is. But yeah, Phantom Menace was my first indicator of that, but I obviously didn't have any of the language for that or any of the understanding of what I'm talking about now, like not on the level that I'm talking about it now. I was just like, really? I really liked it. I really, really liked it. And
yeah,
like, yeah.
I got quiet about liking it because back then I was I was pretty timid. I was very reserved and introverted at the time. I mean, I think I'm still introverted. It's just like in the right settings, I come out a lot more easily. But yeah, I was pretty quiet about liking Phantom Menace until Attack of the Clones came out, and I was like, you know what? I don't care if you don't like this. I really like this, and I you're allowed to not like that. Was, I mean, it was really Attack of the Clones that, like, once I realized, oh, this is going to be a thing, people aren't going to like these. That was kind of when I figured out, like, oh, it's really not a big deal if you don't like it. Just don't try to ruin my enjoyment of it if I like it, and I'm going to extend you the same courtesy when you like something that I think is stupid, which there were plenty of things back then that were popular that I thought was stupid. So I just kind of, I was a little bit prouder at that point. But yeah, it was a little, Phantom Menace happened during a little bit of an awkward phase for me where I was, for the most part had an idea of who I was, but 8th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, you're still figuring it out. But yeah, I was not as brave. I wasn't standing up to people about Phantom Menace until much later.
Yeah, I think I was probably a little bit sooner than that, but that's just by nature of my sense of justice, where I'm like, where I just gotta, like, if I think that somebody is in the wrong, I can't hold it back. And I'm so much better about it now, and the podcasts are really like, if you only know me from engaging with the podcast, which most people listening to it probably do, only from that and like social media, like that parasocial relationship, you would think probably that I'm like this all the time. But the reality is that, like, this is where I save it for here. And out in the world, I am very polite about it, and I'm very like it. But one of the managers at my old job, he was one of the VPs, and every once in a while he, like, something would come out, a new Marvel movie or series or a Star Wars movie or whatever. Everybody would be having lunch, and he would pop into the lunchroom and he'd be like, Mike, what'd you think of blank? And I would always say to him, I would look at my watch, I'd be like, we're half an hour into our lunch right now. What do you want?
Buckle up.
Like, what are you looking for? Are you looking for like a thumbs up, thumbs down? Should you go see it, or do you want to know what I think about it? And Mark is the best. There are not a lot of people from my old job that I like. There are only a handful, maybe about 5 or 6 people, and certainly in terms of like the management, he is probably the only one that I'm like, I actually would like hang out with Mark, because he was always like, go for it. And I would be like, okay, well, buckle up, because I have some thoughts. And then I would go off for 15 to 20 minutes without taking a breath. But like that, it was one of those things of like, is everybody in the room cool with this? Because I'll do it. Like, I'll like, don't threaten me with a good time. But most of the time in my life, in most situations, especially in situations with other geeky people now, like it's like every once in a while, it's like a party trick, right? Like if I'm with a bunch of normies and the mood is right, and somebody clears the runway for me, it's like, all right, like, it's a performance, right? So like, and that can be fun sometimes. But if I'm with a bunch of other geeky people, like at the comic book store, I just sit back. I just sit back now. Like, I just let other people have their opinions and talk about things and tell me what Star Wars is the best Star Wars. And I go, okay, that's cool. That's cool. Like, I just,
good for you. You're wrong.
Yeah. And then if they ask me, like, if they directly ask me, I'll be like, I actually think it's Star Wars Rebels, but I have a lot of reasons for that, and we don't need to get into it. But that's, if you ask me what the best made piece of Star Wars content is, like soup to nuts, start to finish, it's Star Wars Rebels. But but y'all ain't ready for that conversation, like, because I have to like lay the groundwork of what Star Wars actually is. We got to break it down, and then I got to tell you about Dave Filoni, and I have to disabuse you now of your idealized idea of who Dave Filoni is, and I'll tell you about like who the real dude is. But yeah, it's a whole thing. I've said, I'm gonna be at the comic book store this Saturday on Star Wars Day for Free Comic Book Day. There will be lots of people there, and it's gonna be a real difficult day for me. but yeah, I mean, was there anything else about Phantom Menace that you want to talk about?
No, that was pretty much it. I guess the other thing would be news stuff. Like, it was really cool to see it like on the news. I actually had a VHS full of interviews and stuff, because like every time like, oh, the 10 o'clock news is gonna have an interview with Liam Neeson about it, I would have it, and it was like literally full. It was like 2.5 hours or whatever. That's just awesome. Like everything I could find, I was just recording it. But
you still have that?
Yo, yeah, I didn't get rid of that. I've saved a handful of stuff like that, that I've just videotaped off of TV, and like that's awesome. That's absolutely one of them. Still,
you should totally digitize that.
I know. I plan to. My friend has the setup to do it. So at some point, I'm going to dig all that stuff out and bring everything to him and
post that on YouTube, man.
Yeah, people are gonna go nuts.
That'd be so good. Cool, awesome. Well, I mean, that's it for me. I think we've talked a lot about this. I really miss that era. I wish that we could go back to it. But we live in the era that we live in now of, Disney Plus releases and stuff. I mean, like, there's good and bad about both. But yeah, awesome. Well, I think that does it for us on this one. I know you're probably saying to yourself, that's a bit of a shorter episode. This is what they're going to be like. But but a heads up, you're going to start getting them every week. So we're going to have shorter conversations on Force Perspectives, but we're going to be more consistent with putting them out on a weekly basis. And then in the lead up, like once we get to Acolyte, we'll do Acolyte episodes during the run of that. And then we'll be back to this style of episode after that. So I hope that everybody's cool with that and enjoys it. Awesome. Well, that was a great conversation. Thank you, Joe. And again, everybody have an awesome Star Wars day. Go hang out with your friends and enjoy and celebrate Star Wars. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks for listening. Follow Force Perspectives on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ForcePOV. And join us on Discord at ThunderQuack.com/Discord. Support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access to episodes, leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast service, or buy merch at store.thunderquack.com. Force Perspectives is a part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network.